everybody! Today I want to talk about something that I've been recently learning in therapy that has really improved my quality of life, and I hope it can help you too, and that is the difference between a panic attack or an anxiety attack and a sensory meltdown or sensory overload, and why that difference matters. Like I said before on this channel, I do have severe panic disorder, I do have panic attacks, and a lot of times my panic attacks will just be random, but very often they will be triggered by situations. Like I'll have panic attacks if I have to stand in line somewhere, if I'm somewhere crowded, if I'm somewhere too hot, if I'm just somewhere new or somewhere far from home. Any of those things can set off my anxiety and I can have a panic attack from that. However, what I've recently learned from my therapist is that I also have sensory sensitivity and I can go into sensory overload or a sensory meltdown, and I had no idea that I had that. We think it may be because I might be autistic. We're working on getting that diagnosed and knowing for sure if that's happening. But you can also have sensory overload as a side effect of panic disorder or depression or PTSD especially. There are a few other mental health things that can cause that, a few other medical issues that can cause it. And then being overtired or being overly stressed can also make this worse, which is something that, as you know, tends to really happen a lot if you're having a particularly hard time with one of your mental health issues. And what happens when you get sensory overload is your brain is just taking in too many senses and too much sensory information at one time and can't process it. It gets really overwhelmed, and then your brain feels threatened by that and sends you into a panic and makes you have to leave that situation. And a lot of the symptoms can be really similar. You can lose the ability to focus, you can become really irritable or really restless and edgy. You can want to start like covering your ears or your eyes or anything to kind of block out what's bothering you sensory-wise. You can get a massive urge to have to leave. You can end up feeling anxiety, which can trigger a panic attack. You can feel very excited or very wound up, and you become more sensitive to, or you can become more sensitive to any other sensory issues that may bother you already. A lot of different things can set off sensory overload. It can be something like strobe lights or flashing lights or very bright lights, or being in a room that's very crowded, or having multiple people talk at the same time around you, or having like a loud TV going where there's like a loud conversation happening. For me, it tends to really get set off if multiple sensory triggers are happening at the same time. Like if I'm in a crowded room and there's fluorescent lights, which do have a strobe effect, so they can set me off, and it's warm. If those things all happen at the same time, I can lose it. I might be able to handle and tolerate just one of those things at a time. I'm usually very uncomfortable, but a lot of the times I can kind of get through and not actually go into meltdown, but when they combine, it's too much. I also find I'm a lot more prone to them whenever my depression or my anxiety is particularly acting up. If I've been having a lot of panic attacks and then I go to Target or something, I may find the lights bother me a lot more than normal. It may seem like it's not that big of a deal to label it and have it named properly, but the reason it is important is because you do need to treat the two things differently. And again, this depends on your kind of anxiety, your particular brand of panic attacks, and your particular brand of sensory issues. So definitely trust your doctor, trust your therapist. Like, I'm not a doctor, not a therapist, so grain of salt, but this is what my therapist has talked to me about, and this is what has worked for me. Me personally, when I have my panic attacks, a lot of the times my exposure therapy tactics I've learned or just other coping strategies can help me through a situation. Like just doing certain breathing exercises can help, or kind of just timing it and knowing it's not going to last forever, or telling somebody else what is going on. Sometimes just taking a break from the situation for a few minutes and coming back can be enough to kind of let me reset and start over and be okay. However, and what my therapist has told me, and she was like, you need to listen to this, is when it's a sensory issue, she said it's very important to identify whether or not what I'm having is a panic attack or a sensory meltdown, because if it's sensory, I can't power through. There's not really a way to cope with it. There's not like a breathing technique that can make it stop. A lot of times, once a sensory meltdown starts getting really bad, I will have a panic attack too, and the coping things may help with that panic attack, but I'm going to keep feeling those initial sensations over and over and over again and never really get better. And this has been completely game-changing because I would always try to power through. For instance, one of my major triggers are any kind of flashing or strobe lights. And especially when I was younger, I had a massive anxiety fear about ever having a seizure. It just felt like losing control. Actually, I remember watching Steel Magnolias, and when the character has a seizure in it, like when she's leading into a seizure, that felt and looked so much like a panic attack oncoming. So I didn't know what panic attacks were, that I was really afraid I was having seizures. So I just developed this huge phobia. So I thought that anytime I'd see strobe lights, I would just be really scared that I was going to like suddenly develop epilepsy and have a seizure. So I try to like force myself to watch them still and be like, no, you're being crazy. But then I realized it was happening like, even when I'd be like not remotely anxious, or I wouldn't associate the lights with strobe lights, so I wouldn't have that fear or phobia come up, and I didn't really understand what's happening. And then I'd get so mad at myself because I'd be like, this shouldn't be bothering you, it shouldn't be setting you off. And I would try to use my coping strategies. I try to breathe, I would try to tell somebody, I try to like take a break, and it wouldn't help. And that would make me feel more anxious, because then I have another phobia that like once I'm in a panic attack, I'm never going to come back out of it, that's just going to be my new forever. And so whenever this happens, I would start thinking, this is what's going on. Like, this is a panic attack that's never going to go away. This is going to be the rest of my life. People tell me that's not possible. Clearly it is, because it's happening. And I would just get more and more afraid and more scared. So with panic attacks, my therapist strongly urges me to try to find a way to cope, try a way to get through it, try to find a way to not have to like give up on the situation entirely. However, with sensory issues, she says I need to pretty much just admit that it's not something I can do, and to take myself out of the situation if I have to. There are some ways I've been able to cope a little bit if it's not too much and if it's not like multiple sensory things happening at the same time. For instance, if I'm again at Target and the lights are bothering me, I got these glasses from Forever 21 that are sunglasses that have kind of a rose gold tint to it instead of a black tint to it. And if I put those on, it can be just enough to kind of alter the lighting and stabilize it a little bit so that I don't get as triggered by it, I don't feel as strained by it, it's a little bit easier. But very often, if I realize it's a sensory issue, I will just be like, I'm not able to do this today, I can't do this right now. I'm still trying to learn the difference between what is anxiety and what is a sensory issue, because they are so similar in presentation. It can be really difficult to tell. They do tend to get very intertwined with each other. But one clue I've had a lot is if I leave a situation and immediately feel better or feel 70% better, and it's just like residual panic from being upset about what's happening, that is often a big sign in me. Like, there are many times I'll be in Target, almost unable to walk, can't think straight, can't see straight, can barely function, and I get outside, and other than being kind of exhausted from what just happened, I'm instantly almost completely better, to the point that a lot of times, especially before I went over this with my therapist, I would be like, oh, actually I'm fine, and just go right back in. That happened all the time. I think what I was having was a panic attack. I'd go outside, realize I felt fine, and be like, oh, the panic attack must be over, go back in and have another meltdown, and it would just be a really bad cycle. While this has been great, because it's been fantastic to kind of know what's going on and not always have it progress to like hours of suffering and multiple panic attacks from it, and really just this huge confused, scared guilt spiral, it also is kind of upsetting because there's not really a treatment for this. Sometimes if you treat the accompanying issue, like certain autistic people can take medications that can help calm down the sensory issues, there's not really a clear treatment for this yet. Usually all that you're told to do is try to identify and avoid your triggers as much as possible, and to try to sleep well and drink well and eat well, because all of that can put you into a better state for handling these things. But it is really kind of frustrating. I'm trying to just accept it for what it is. It does feel very limiting sometimes. There are some things I just can't do. Like, I went to go see Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I am obsessed with that show, and I was so thrilled to get to see it in person, to see it live on Broadway, but I had to leave within half an hour because almost the entire show was lit by strobe lights, and I couldn't. I was going absolutely out of my mind. Like, I couldn't sit still in my chair. I was starting to scratch up my arms. I could not function. It was terrible, and I tried way too long to end up having a massive panic attack too, and it was just a really horrific experience. And if I had known what the issue was, I probably would have just never gone to see it. And as much as that hurts and as upsetting as that is, honestly, it's better than going there and just being in a massive meltdown spiral, because like it's very hard to describe just how unsettling and how scary it is. Like, it's a really overwhelming thing. I can really barely put into words. It's very much like a panic attack, but a panic attack you just can do absolutely nothing about, which then makes you feel completely out of control and just like this is forever, and like there must be something really wrong with you, or the panic must be getting worse or something. Like, it's really scary. There are some tips to try to make it more bearable though. Like, it's really helpful to me to really identify what my triggers are so that I can kind of prep for it and try to plan ways to not have to deal with them all at once as much as possible. Things like bringing the sunglasses to places I know are going to have harsh lighting or something like that. Sometimes it's just making sure I have something there to distract me. Like, a lot of times I'll bring my Switch or my Nintendo DS with me, because if I'm getting very visually overwhelmed and very just overwhelmed by everything, sometimes I can play my game and kind of tune it out a little bit. I do this all the time if I'm going to the movies, because a lot of time if movies have a lot of really fast cuts or really bright lights or flashing lights, I can get way overloaded by that. But if I am, and I only do this if I'm like in a theater with seats where the seats are high enough and there's no one right around me and no one else is bothered, and I turn the brightness all the way down. Like, I never do it in a way it's going to bother people. Sometimes I'll like even put like a sweatshirt over myself so I'm kind of covering it up. But sometimes I'll play something like that, or play like the game on my phone and kind of half watch the movie or just listen to the movie while I'm looking at my game. And that's the only way I can actually pay attention to something. I'll sometimes also do that if I'm going to like, I feel terrible because I feel like it looks like I'm not paying attention, but if I go to like, I've been to a lot of book release launches where authors will just sit on stage and talk about their book and take Q&As. And a lot of times I'll make sure I'm kind of sitting in the back, away from other people, usually on the aisle seat with my partner next to me, and they know what's going on and they don't think I'm being rude. And then I'll get out my phone or my DS if I need to, and that's honestly the only way I can pay attention to what's happening. It looks like I'm not paying attention, but if I wasn't doing that, there's no way I could follow what they were saying. So that can help me sometimes. Something else that can help is to just make sure you have a plan in place for how to handle it. For instance, I'm going to be going to a convention next month, but I'll like look up in advance like where the exits may be, or if they have like the quiet room to go sit down in and what the path is to that. I'll look up like where the bathrooms are, where there's likely to be like a quiet hallway or somewhere I can go sit and relax. If I'm at a party or at an event, I tend to do a lot better if I'm like more towards the corner of a room or near the exit or near a window where I can see outside. I do better if I'm sitting on an aisle seat, because then I don't feel like people are all around me and I can get up and leave if I need to easily. Sometimes with something like a party, I'll just recognize it's going to be too much. Like, oftentimes it's not like a continual loud thing. It'll just be a few minutes where people are being too loud, and I'll use that as a chance to go to a quieter room or go sit outside for a few minutes and then come back in. And I'm really open with everybody about what I have, so I can kind of let them know, you know, this is just too much, you need to go take a sensory break. And sometimes that can help, and I can come back when things calm down a little bit. But I wanted to bring this up in case you think it might be something you're going through too. It's really was very helpful for me to identify it, even if it feels really limiting and depressing sometimes. It also has been a huge help, because not having as many meltdowns has been fantastic and has helped my anxiety a lot. It definitely hasn't gotten rid of it, but I feel like I know how to handle those now, whereas before I had no idea and I was kind of just at the mercy of my disorder, and it was really overwhelming and really, really scary, and just made me feel completely out of control and very, very uncomfortable. I feel like uncomfortable is just way too mild of a word. Like, it's genuinely horrifying when it happens, and it feels like everything in your body is wrong and everything in the world is too much, and I cannot describe how overwhelming it is. It is not fun. But if you think you do have this, it's absolutely worth bringing up to your doctor or your therapist or whoever you talk to about things like this, because it may help you to be able to identify what's really happening and how you can avoid that happening in the future, or try to lessen it as much as you can. Alright, that's it for this video. I'll definitely update you guys as I find out more about what I have, or if I learn any new coping techniques. This is all really new to me, so I definitely don't have all the answers. I don't know everything about it at all, but I wanted to share this with you right now because it has been such a revelation for me. I hate the idea of somebody like going through years not knowing the way I have, so I wanted to put it out there in case it might help you too. I'll be back this week with another video, so until then, take care, be happy, and be well.